there, and welcome to Central Texas Gardener. I'm Tom Spencer. Fragrance and color is an unbeatable combination, especially in summer when our energy starts to lag. But as the heat comes on, so do the Plumerias. Today, Kurt Hudgeons explains how to grow these romantic tropicals for spectacular hot weather attention. On tour, we visit a garden where tropicals, natives, and life's journey come together.
Elayne Lansfords' garden has been a journey she's traveled with husband John Villanacci and their 2 sons. Their family includes Cookies and Cream and Sparkplug, who share the land that meets a garden. Now certified as a National Wildlife Federation backyard habitat, Elayne's garden journey started with tropical container plants that she's collected and tended for years.
I had a grandmother who grew what she called flowers on her front porch, and I loved her very much. And I guess when I first went away to college, she gave me some flowers to take with me, and I actually still have the fern that she gave me when I was 16 years old.
When Elayne ventured outside the pot, she didn't abandon them.
Well, they're beautiful, and also they're my little creatures. Some gardeners get rid of things that they don't care about, and I always tend things or I pass them on. But I don't mind the containers. I find it very peaceful to water in the evenings.
Since the boys are grown, Elayne recycled the playscape for storage.
Because I do so much potting, being such a container gardener, it's kind of an integral part of what I do, and I didn't see any reason to hide it.
In winter, greenhouses ensure that our longtime friends will be around another year. For bedded tropicals along the kitchen, John designed a temporary cover to install when temperatures drop.
But it really was not until my sons got past playing soccer that I could do a whole lot in the garden.
Figuring out her native soil and how plants responded to it carried her to the next phase of her garden journey.
Very slowly, I started learning about how to actually grow things in Central Texas.
Elayne created a living room cove bordered by sun that gives way to shade.
My garden is absolutely full of things that people have given me, and in some ways those are more special than the things that one has to buy.
Some new treasures were a gift from nature.
That's part of the joy of, I guess, any garden, is simply seeing what comes up.
A trip to Bali inspired a pavilion constructed by friends as an anchor for garden reflection. Later, she added a pond to harmonize the peaceful setting. Elayne also wanted to provide a drink for the wildlife that finds a haven in her garden.
I think especially having grown up in the country long before it became popular to do that, it was just a part of my life. So I've always wanted the wild creatures to be welcome here.
She plants with wildlife in mind in her certified National Wildlife Federation backyard habitat. The next step on her journey was training as a steward to help others create habitats of their own. In Elayne's garden, wildlife travels between her organized beds and the open spaces. Although she promotes and protects the land beyond the garden's borders, like removing invasive non-natives, she values its different attitude and unbridled solace.
I love the transition areas between wild and civilized, and that was a lot of what I wanted to do out there.
She signified the transition with another memory from her journey.
I had seen a bottle tree when I was maybe 15 years old. And this was again before they got as popular, and just loved it. It was somewhere kind of, I don't know, in rural Texas. And I thought, I will have a bottle tree someday. So my sweet husband, who of course does a great deal of setting me up, made me the post, and then we started collecting bottles.
Elayne added a new cove to the transition, inspired by a visit to designer and author Jill Noakes' garden when her journey met an intersection.
I got diagnosed with breast cancer in 2005 and had gone through the treatment, and it just about did me in. It was, I mean, although I had very good doctors, I just had a hard time with the treatment, and started thinking, if I don't do something to try to, you know, take care of myself, I'm not going to make it in this world. And then I realized that the thing that I wanted to do more than anything was to garden. So I decided to add to the gardens, and I would wobble out here and, you know, work for 15 minutes and then wobble back in. But it just kept going, and I got stronger, and the garden happened. It was my way to heal.
Plant names may not be in her husband's vocabulary, but John Villanacci understands what they mean to her.
Actually, he just found out that his name in Italian may mean bad farmer, which we really laughed about, because it's, he is not much of a gardener, but he is wonderfully supportive of things that I want to do, and has put in endless hours, you know, helping me.
All right, thanks so much for sharing your garden with us. And right now we're going to take a voyage to Hawaii, or at least to learn about the plumeria plants that are so famous in those magical isles. I'm joined by two guests today, Kurt Hudgeons and his daughter Bailey. Bailey, welcome to Central Texas Gardener.
Thank you.
And Kurt, welcome back. It's great to have you here.
Good to come back.
Now, you are a plantsman and do a lot of work with ponds at It's About Time, a great nursery in the South Austin area. But you have a particular passion for plumerias. I had to say that.
You could say that.
And tell me, plumerias are the plants that are famous in Hawaii for the flowers that create those beautiful leis, those fragrant necklaces of petals that the tourists wear there. Now, how did you get so interested in this plant family?
Working in the nursery and just being in contact with so many plant people, running across the plant, the leaves attracted me right off the bat. And but coming to find that there's so many colors out there that most people don't realize are available to you, I started collecting them from all over the world: India, Thailand, Australia, any place I could find just something unusual and out of the ordinary.
Well, they do come in a very wide range of colors, and we're going to talk about that. And you know, plant nerds are always interested in the things that they don't see very often. Right. So it doesn't surprise me that the exotic nature of these plants drew you to them. Bailey, now, what's your favorite thing about the plumeria plants? What do you enjoy about growing them? Because I understand that you work with your dad a whole lot, right?
Yes, I especially like that they're really fragrant.
Mm-hmm. They're beautifully fragrant. And one thing that I didn't really realize, Kurt, is that there are a whole bunch of different kinds of fragrances, aren't there?
Oh yeah, I personally have around 200 named varieties of plumeria, and a bunch that aren't named yet because I grow them from seed. Mm-hmm. They vary from, you know, vanilla to baby powder, peaches, lemons, you name it.
And Bailey, you have a particular favorite one, is that right?
Uh-huh.
And what does it smell like?
Kool-Aid.
Well, that's great. And we have actually, that plant right here is the Kool-Aid plumeria, isn't that right?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And this is one, tell me a little bit about this particular plant. This is a Kool-Aid scent. Is I'm assuming it's a pink flower.
It's a darker pink with a light yellow center, real pointed petals. That's her mother plant, and we use it for cutting stock. I try to not order cuttings in for people and just grow my own, and that way I can guarantee freshness and be able to provide people with as many varieties as I can get here.
Well, I think the one that you brought there has a really beautiful classic form for a plumeria, and it shows that they don't have to be just straight sticks. That you can work with the shaping of them and come up with something really beautiful. And I really like that. Now, I understand that these plants are really xeric. They really don't like water.
That's where most people get the miscommunication through the plumeria world, is that they're very tropical, need lots and lots of water. And that's, in some areas in Hawaii where they get a lot of rain, their soil doesn't retain a lot of moisture. Here in Central Texas, with the fact that they don't like our winters and we have to find other ways of growing them, we use container growing, most people do, and you have to use a really well-drained potting soil, cactus mix. And overwatering is about the worst thing you could do for them. You want to treat them more like a succulent or a rosemary and let them dry out thoroughly in between waterings.
All right. Well, we have another variety here that you brought that has a flower that's kind of opening there.
It's trying.
Yeah, I understand all the big plants that you have are the ones in bloom, so they were a little difficult to bring into the studios with you. So tell me what this one is.
That's a Carmen. I've had that one probably 3 years. I acquired that one out of Hawaii. It came as just a stick. I'm trying to get it right now. It has 2 inflows on it, which is the inflorescence where the flowers are going to grow. You want to get them to bloom as much as possible because that'll cause them to branch.
Right.
And the more branches, the more magnificent plants you get.
Okay, all very interesting information. Now, I understand that you help your dad in all aspects of this, and do you help him when he propagates the plants, when he collects the seeds and all of that?
No, not really.
Not that part, huh? So you leave the plant propagation to Dad. Now,
you have to be careful with them because a lot of people don't realize that they are actually a toxic plant. They have a cactus milky white substance to them, and I don't let my daughters really mess with the plant when I'm doing cuttings, and I'm always very careful about not putting my fingers in my eyes and whatnot. I mean, it's a beautiful plant, but you need to be aware of the milk of it.
Okay, well, point well taken.
And it is deer resistant because of that, too.
I've actually seen them planted in the ground in a few Austin gardens.
Zilker Gardens has them in the ground. I've got some huge ones in my house that she can climb that are planted right in the backyard.
You climb some of these plants?
She could.
No.
I don't let her.
Because they can break easily.
Yeah, I would think that they would break pretty easily. That's true. Now, let's talk a little bit about propagation on these, because there are 2 different ways to do it. And one is actually, if you have a plant that actually produces a seed pod, you can collect those, right?
Seed pods, generally most people don't run into the seed pods because it happens on a more mature plant. And a lot of people spray a lot of pesticides. So they're constantly knocking back the insects that actually do the whole process. It's a nocturnal sphinx moth. And this is a seed pod here. It takes probably 6 months for one to grow to maturity. It'll come out of your flower spike.
Okay.
Once it gets about 8 to 10 inches long, you'll start noticing that they're going to go more vertical. And I'll wrap them with a pair of pantyhose. That way, if you're not home all the time to watch the thing explode, you can catch anywhere from 50 to 100 seeds per pod.
Okay.
Most people don't know of it as a propagation form because, one thing, they don't see it on their plants, and another thing, that you can't guarantee the variety from seed. It's either going to bloom to be the parent, which is very rare, and if it doesn't bloom to be the parent, then you have a one-of-a-kind specimen. You'll be the only one in the entire world.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's not a guaranteed way to pass on a plant name. That's why most people go by cuttings.
And this is something I know many people have tried, but so many people tell me that they've not been successful with cuttings. Why are they failing?
A lot of people have to mail order them because they don't know that they're local. And sometimes you can get a plant in that's already wrinkled and withered and has been cut for too long. But generally, people overwater this plant.
I see.
The 2 things that I find most people do that kill their plumerias is they freeze them and they drown them. What I do is I like to go through my stock early spring, whenever your leaves are starting to come back out,
Right.
you'll notice that they're kind of getting almost a gluey, sticky substance to the tips. That means the plant is in a vigorous state of growth. That's when I go through my stock and do my cuttings. I'll choose at least a 12-inch piece.
Okay.
A lot of times I'm just trimming a plant to actually manicure the mother plant and make it branch better.
Okay.
The end that you cut, you want to let it callus over for about a week or two until it's completely scabbed.
Okay.
Don't use any rooting hormone, any fertilizer, but you want to plant this in a 1-gallon pot, about 4 to 5 inches down. Water it thoroughly. If it's a good size cutting, you might have to stake it, bamboo stake it, keep it from wiggling, because you want to keep it pretty still.
Sure.
Water it thoroughly that day, and then write it on your calendar. Don't touch it for a month.
So water it once, and then just leave it alone.
Leave it alone. Let the roots start growing from nothing, and then they're going to reach out and try to get through the dryness and try to find moisture, and you can promote root growth a lot better that way.
Okay, so excellent. So wait a month, then will you see leaf growth at that point?
Well, when you do cut them, I like to take all the leaves off immediately, and that way you're not fooled. I have no leaves, real leaves on this plant, so once it actually grows a real leaf, that's a pretty good warning sign that you have some roots on the plant, and you can start treating it more like a real plant, watering it just when it's dry.
Okay.
Definitely don't overdo it.
All right. Now, I think that's such great advice and for taking care of plants. What about the cold situation? As I mentioned, I have seen a few in actual gardens in the center of town here in Austin. Doesn't surprise me, our past few winters have been so mild, but generally this is not a plant you would put in the ground at all.
It just depends. Zilker Gardens, they have a couple of huge Plumerias there, and just massive. And I'm not sure if they actually plant them or they plunge them. Plunging is a method of leaving them in a container, taking the entire container and burying it in the ground. Come wintertime, you can yank it up and store it in your greenhouse. Okay,
well, I want to let people know that they can visit you and Bailey down at It's About Time. And you have all sorts of things that you do down there. You have seminars on building ponds. I'm sure that you also teach about the Plumerias. And a lot of these plants are available there, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, we hope people will visit you there and start experimenting with these beautiful plants. There are lots of beautiful relatives that you brought in as well. Didn't have quite time to talk about those. But if you're interested in some beautiful, beautiful plants with great color, I know that you'll enjoy these. Thank you so much for being our guest. And thanks, Bailey, for coming along as well.
You're welcome.
All right, coming up next is our friend Skip.
Hello and welcome to Down to Earth. This week's question regards managing diseases of the foliage on plants. You might have noticed leaf spots, powdery mildew, and other diseases can become a problem on some plants in the landscape. Well, let's start with a little plant pathology 101, I guess, and that is to understand what causes disease. You have not only the organism, in the case of a fungus, maybe it's a spore that lands on the leaf, but you also have to have a plant that's susceptible and the right environment for the disease to develop. Those three are called the disease triangle. If you knock out any one of those three corners, you avoid the disease problem. For example, if you plant plants that are resistant naturally to disease, such as a crepe myrtle that's resistant to powdery mildew, you've taken away the plant corner and you're not going to have problems with that disease. If you affect the environment, you can either affect it in ways that promote disease or in ways that tend to fight disease. For example, when you overhead water and sprinkle plants, wetting the foliage a lot tends to promote disease. By going to drip irrigation or minimizing those waterings, you help avoid the disease. Some plants, such as the rock rose, for example, when you move them into shade, they get more powdery mildew than they do in the sun. That's an environmental change back out to the sun that helps avoid the disease. So look at it from that standpoint. The third way is to deal with the disease agent itself, and that's what we call sprays. We spray to kill the disease, and that certainly is an option, but it shouldn't be our first choice. We have sprays that are more toxic and less toxic, but we would rather begin with the environment and choosing plants that are naturally resistant. And that's the easiest way to fight disease, whether it's a vegetable garden, fruit trees, your lawn, or other areas of the landscape. Our featured plant this week is ice plants. Ice plants are a really interesting succulent. They have a beautiful reddish pink bloom that I think is really attractive. Here in our Central Texas landscape, it's not an invasive plant for us at all. It does quite well, surviving through the heat. Now, you'd think with a name like ice plant, it couldn't take the heat, but it really does. It looks well spilling over a wall. It does well in containers also. There's actually a number of different types of plants that go by the name of ice plant, but they are very hardy. They tend to survive the drought quite well, and we ought to be planting them more. Out in the garden, it's time to continue those plantings of melons, the winter squash, even eggplant, and certainly okra, which just loves the heat. You want to continue to keep those coming so that you can have harvests on into the fall and winter season. If you have container plants that are color containers or vegetable containers, you want to fertilize those pretty often. By continuing to provide small amounts of fertilizer, you can keep feeding them, keep them healthy and blooming and producing and looking really good. Out in the landscape, remember that when you water, a deep soaking is the best way to go about it. By watering a thorough soaking through the soil profile, you continue to promote good deep rooting, provide the plants the water it needs, but don't keep things too wet. So deep and infrequent is the key. The idea is to provide the water the plant needs, but to allow it to dry out a little bit between waterings. And finally, always add that mulch. It helps fight weeds which steal water, and it also protects the soil. For more plant tips or to contact the Extension office in your county, visit klru.org/CTG.
Thanks, Skip. Now let's check in with John Dromgoole for Backyard Basics.
Hello, gardening friends. Welcome to Backyard Basics. Well, at certain parts of the year, especially in the summertime, but it occurs really throughout the warm months, we run into this guy right here. This big old mosquito biting us on the arm, hassling us while we're outside, and we can prevent that. I think that one of the more important ways of doing this is to use some of the natural mosquito repellents that are out there. There's really an assortment here. Many of them, or most of them really, are made out of herb oils of some kind. Eucalyptus, clove, peppermint, citronella is one of the more popular ones. And so this is what you'll find in stores that sell natural products. And you'll find them in the places where you get camping gear too. So this would be my first choice. If I'm going outside for a while, I would go ahead and put some of that on me. A lot of people like to make their own, and there are many oils, high quality oils, that you might select at some of these same places, especially health food stores and herb shops and groceries that sell natural products. You'll find the oils themselves, and you can make your own little spray. What you're going to use is an alcohol, a 190 proof grain alcohol. You got to get that at a liquor store, but that's the basic one that's being used. And then it's mixed with any of these oils, or sometimes the combination of them, and you can make a nice little spray at home. But on the market, you'll find many things to keep them out of the yard or to manage them where they're breeding. And where they're breeding in tires and water ponds, these different places out in the yard, you might use something like this. This stops them in the water. And this is a bacteria. And this bacteria, when added to ponds and all of these places where they're breeding, little places in the back where water accumulates, it doesn't make any difference where they're breeding. This would be very good to sprinkle in there. And it breaks them up at that larval stage. So that's a critical point to get rid of them. Sometimes they're all over the backyard and you want to use the yard this weekend for a barbecue or whatever you might be doing, swimming out there. And so a good way to repel them is with a garlic spray. Garlic is very effective, and I mean very effective, when you spray it over the yard. And you can easily use something like this on several thousand feet, and it works for several weeks also. So garlic is a very good one. Here's one that comes partly from South America, and it's got an herb that's used down there quite a bit, and it's called andiroba. And andiroba mixed with citronella and a little bit of rosemary and some thyme make a great repellent. You put these out around the area and you light them, and they will repel the mosquitoes very, very well. This is a trap, a pheromone trap. This is also very effective. It has some holes on the side. You'll mix up the pheromone, add it into this, and over time, and not too long really, the mosquitoes start coming in there in large numbers. You just leave them there and you collect a whole bunch of them, and then you can get another pheromone pack and start over. But it lasts a very long time out in the yard. And here's another one right here that you'll find, and this is a granular to spread around the yard. It covers 3,000, 4,000 square feet, a nice area. And this one has lemongrass in it. It has some peppermint oil and garlic oil, and it's on Fuller's Earth, a natural product. And so this is another granule that's really popular out there. There are some other ones based around cedar oils. Those are good to broadcast out into the yard. And there's some traditional plants that sometimes people grow them at home and make their own mosquito repellents. This is one of the scented geraniums right here. This is a very effective one, commonly used in many places. Sometimes you'll find the oils out there too. Here's lemongrass. Lemongrass is one that's used in the Far East and Asian countries, and folks over here who know how to use it will make an extract out of the lemongrass. And there's other things like catnip, lemon balm, and this yarrow. This is a very common one. Normally we use the white yarrow. And so this is another thing that can be made at home. So, as you can see, there are many natural ways of controlling this. You don't have to spray yourself with some kind of a chemical to manage the mosquitoes and enjoy your yard. For Backyard Basics, I'm John Dromgoole. I'll see you next time.
Be sure to check out klru.org/CTG for online video, more tips, and the Central Texas Gardener blog. Next week, we'll take a look at elegant clumping bamboos. Until then, I'll see you in the garden.